Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are. I'm Malcolm Hawker. I'm the head. I'm the head of data strategy at Prophecy Software. I'm also the host of the CDO Matters podcast, and I'm still having my first cup of coffee in the morning here on a lovely Monday morning. I'm thrilled that you are joining us in whatever medium you're choosing to consume our content, whether that is podcast providers, whether that is through YouTube. Thanks for checking us out. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Jason Foster. He's the CEO of Synerger, which is a data and analytics focused consultancy based in lovely London, but with a growing presence here in the US. Jason also wrote a book called Data Means Business. And I have to be honest, I haven't read it, but it is absolutely positively on my list to consume. I do have a long list of books, but I consume them rather voraciously when it comes to data and analytics space. Jason, happy Monday. Good to see you.
Happy Monday. Yeah, good to see you too. I'm on my fourth cup of coffee.
I try not.
So I'm a little bit further ahead than you.
Yeah, afternoon, I try to cut it off. I found that if I'm drinking past noon, it starts to have impacts into the evening for me. I can't. It's harder to gear down. But at four, is that normal?
Yeah. Well, so here's me with it being a data geek straight away. So that's a data-driven decision, being able to have coffee this late. So I've got a fitness tracker that you can put in sort of habits, and it will tell you the impact of those habits. And one of the habits that I tracked was coffee and at what time I have coffee. And I can drink coffee up until much later in the afternoon than I thought I could, and it doesn't impact on my sleep or my recovery. So there we go. I now drink coffee a bit later.
So one of the worst. This sounds dramatic because it wasn't certainly the worst thing. I mean, we've had more terrible things happen, but one of the more, let's just say, interesting experiences I've had over the last couple of years as a rabid coffee drinker was my wife making the mistake of buying decaf coffee and not knowing, and us not knowing it. And she drinks tea, so she's not a coffee drinker. She's a tea drinker. I'm the coffee drinker in the house, and she writes for me when she goes out. And I remember one day just waking up and had this horrible headache, like a dull headache, and it wouldn't go away all day. I just thought maybe I was a little dehydrated. I didn't know what was going on. The next day, I'm like irritable and she didn't want to get anywhere near me. My headache is horrible. I'm lethargic and I'm just horrible to be around. And I don't know what led me to do it, but I ended up looking at the coffee. It's decaf. That's just an honest mistake, right? But detox was horrible. I mean,
cold turkey on the coffee.
It was horrible. Like I was an incorrigible human being that nobody would want to be around. It's like, oh my gosh, wow.
So now you're intravenous, but you stop at midday.
No, I still drink a lot of it. Funny thing is now, maybe what I've noticed is that the more I drink, the more sleepy I tend to get, which maybe makes me think I'm like ADHD or something. I don't know, but because I've heard that people that have there's for certain people, coffee actually makes them tired.
More tired, again.
Yeah. I don't
No.
know. Anyway. We came to talk about data.
You did, yeah. Well, I tried to take us there, and you took us back to coffee, yeah.
Yeah, you did. I wanted to share a story about going cold turkey on coffee because it was not a pretty time in the Hawker household, that's for sure. So, let's get into it. You're out there, right? You're in the field. You're talking with clients all day, every day. You're talking with CDOs. I'd love to dive into just kind of let's talk about AI readiness because I think for anybody in any role within a data function in an organization, if you go to an industry event this year, that will be the thing that you hear about. I suspect you'll be walking into the exhibit halls, and it doesn't matter what those people are selling, whether it's consultancy, whether it's software, you name it, you're going to be hearing about AI readiness. I think. What do you think?
I suppose conferences will be definitely. They will lean on and major on AI, whether it's AI readiness. I think that's a specific strand of thing that people need to get their heads around. But yeah, certainly AI, software for it, automation, how you speed up, how you embed, how you need to think about it, the training you might need, the team that you might need, the culture that you're going to have, all of this stuff that you need to think about, the opportunities, the use cases, all this kind of stuff. I think so. It's definitely conferences. I think the what's really interesting as we talk to more and more organizations in every sector almost is quite a broad range actually of understanding of buy-in, of readiness, to use your word, even just mental readiness to take a leap and jump in. So there is a broad spectrum of organizations who have a broad spectrum of understanding and therefore a broad spectrum of ability to execute when it comes to AI. But yeah, it's a big topic. It's a big topic. Not hype either, I don't think.
So it's interesting. You suggested there that there are some companies that are reluctant. My company, Prophecy, is just working currently to publish some research related to kind of AI readiness. Some of the things that we're seeing out there are this idea that there's reluctancy or fear, maybe, or uncertainty. I don't know what it is, but you suggested that in your last response. Are you seeing the same? Are you seeing some data leaders saying like, I don't know about this thing?
Yeah.
This thing being AI.
Yeah, completely. I mean, to be honest, any tech innovation, any change, full stop, you get that, right? You get reluctance, you get fear, you get uncertainty, you get worry, you get, people thinking it's a bubble, thinking it's a hype, and obviously if that leans into their fear, then they'll see it as a bubble more because they want, almost don't want to lean into the change. So yeah, totally. People are reluctant. I think the lion's share is that conversations we have is that people want to understand it. People want to get their head around it. That might result in them not doing anything. That would be totally fine if that's right for their organization and their industry. But I think, yeah, that's more. I think where most people want to understand it, not really sure where to start, not really sure, where to go, not sure who to listen to. But it's getting attention of very senior business people in organizations wanting to go, let's crack on and do this AI thing, whatever that ends up meaning to them.
Well, I think it's normal for there to be kind of early adopters and late adopters in any technology, right? I mean, that's a very normal thing. There's an adoption curve.
Yeah.
But I get the sneaking suspicion, and maybe this is just me caught up in the hype, but I get the suspicion that this time things are a little bit different. Not maybe necessarily from a business value perspective, but just from the perspective of expectations of CDOs, right? What I see a lot in the market is, some CDOs that were caught a little flat-footed with COVID. I mean, we were all caught flat-footed with COVID. Nobody could have ever anticipated that to that degree. But a lot of companies, a lot of boards, and a lot of CEOs said, "Hey, okay, we need to transform." Right, like we got a little caught a little flat-footed. Right, our supply chains were a little more brittle than we thought they were. Our customer relationships weren't necessarily maybe as solid as we thought they were. And hey, let's do this digital transformation. So 2 to 3 years ago, during the middle of the pandemic, I think there were expectations that were placed on CDOs, and I think a lot of them weren't ready for that. And I'm seeing a lot of the same now when it comes to AI, when there's also kind of maybe this pushback and a little bit of that uncertainty where there's a lot of expectations, and some of the people may be expressing some of that uncertainty or wanting to just wait and see how things unfold. Maybe they shouldn't be. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I don't think this is. You mentioned there, this is something that's new. This AI isn't new. AI has been around for a very long time, and certainly in the last 10 years, lots of AI, technology has been built by vendors and by in-house teams to learn and look at patterns and automate things and we think about personalization engines and improving supply chain efficiency. All of this stuff has been based on models. Pharmaceutical industries have been using it for understanding the human body, biology, drug application, all this kind of thing. So AI isn't new. I think the thing that is new is generative AI. Yeah. And the reason it's got the hype and the attention is because of how pervasive it has gone so quickly. So, and I think those two things are quite different, actually, in terms of how they manifest themselves in organizations, and particularly when it comes to the CDO, the role that the CDO does or doesn't play in shaping the strategy for and defining and executing AI versus or as well as generative AI. So yes, I think so that's one side of that is actually some of this isn't new, some of this is, and we need to understand the various merits of all those things and how we get our heads around them and what we do about it. I think this idea of being ready, though, is interesting because what does being ready mean? Being
Good
ready is
question.
being ready in the current world is that you're ready for what? You're ready for change. You're ready for iteration. You're ready for pandemics. You're ready for economic uncertainty. You're ready for new presidents. All these things that happen around you. And actually, I think being an organization that's adaptable and agile is the most important thing, because there's always something that's coming along, and you always need to be ready for the next. Nothing stays still. Some change is slow and generational, and some change is quite quick. But you need to be keeping on your toes and not resting on your laurels. So I think there's a sort of general level of readiness required. But when it comes specifically to kind of data and applications that you need to build, and data products and infrastructure, and having the rules and routines and methods and operating model and the right people, all these things that you need in place to be good at data, there's never a good time to get ready. The opportunity is great whether AI exists or not. The opportunity is great in terms of your business and your strategy and your operation. So I think it's always time to make sure you've got your foot on the gas with what it is you need to have in place to be good at using data to guide decisions. AI is then an application on top that helps you go even faster and do even more things.
It's such a good question. Like, what does that even mean, right? Like, us technologists, we like to put everything into these kind of deterministic sets, and it's like, okay, if you do these things, these 5 things, the project is done, right?
You're
And then
ready.
we can
Yeah.
launch the project, right? But the
Yeah.
idea that you could do 5 things and be AI ready, but only halfway through the fourth, you're not ready, right? But then some
Mm.
magically you hit the 5th thing, and then okay, now I'm all of a sudden we're ready. And
Yeah.
I guess that's your point, which
Yeah.
is that there is no end
Yeah.
here, right? There's no okay, launch, we're done. All of a sudden now we're AI ready. What you're saying is what you need to do as a leader is to build a change resistant. I don't know if that's the right phrase,
Yeah.
but change ready or change resistant, or the ability to absorb change. That's what you should be aiming for, whether it's
Yeah.
a pandemic or whether it's a new president or whether it is AI. That's what you should be aiming for. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing you say.
Yeah. Look, I did a presentation at a conference a few years back, and in the opening section of that, I talked about the people that were ready for the sort of the early 2000s economic challenges were able to better trade through that if they already had good insight and good handle on data, and able to kind of look at the future and look at forecasts and look at what came before and look at their customer bases. They could trade better through that. In the UK and Europe, people that were best set for when the GDPR new guidelines came in, were better able to manage themselves through that change. In fact, it wasn't change for some people that got ready early on. So they were best suited to be able to get through that. When the pandemic hit, the people that had already got good platforms, good procedures, good data leadership, good analytics, good insight in place, were able to look at what the situation and trade better through COVID. Then this AI things have come along, and there's always going to be these new things. So as I say, there's never really a good time to get ready. It's just, I think it's something that there's an acceptance, I think, in business generally now, that being able to make the most of the data they have access to, internal and external, to help make better decisions about the operations, about the strategy, about where you're going, about customers, about all these things within your organization. You need to do that anyway. Something new comes along, then you're able to kind of build on top of it. This idea of iteratively improving, I think, makes you constantly ready for the next thing. And I think that's what people should be focused on doing now.
Yeah, or learning by doing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like just do it, right? If I don't think anybody could be fully AI ready, at least like right now, with the pace of change in technology. I think you could make a valid case to say nobody is ever kind of fully ready, but the best way that you can try to keep pace is
Do something.
potentially just learn by doing. Find
Yeah.
some use cases that can be supported with Gen AI.
Yeah.
Yet I'm still hearing a lot of people say, well, I'm not sure we're ready. So, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people like you and companies like yours, or even people like me, to say, hey, nobody's ready, but you got to go, right? If there are valuable use cases out
It's
there,
the right thing to do. Yeah.
don't do it just for doing its sake. I mean, we've learned our lesson here, maybe the hard way, but if you think there's value, and I can pretty much guarantee you that there will be, I mean,
Yeah.
the number of use cases is potentially endless.
I think AI, particularly generative AI, is big enough, transformational enough, that just answering the question of how impactful could or would this be to our organization, our industry, before doing anything is really valuable, because that helps you determine whether you need to do something now, later, quickly, slowly, not at all, go all in. Do you know what I mean? You've got to kind of go, it's worth having a proactive understanding of the response your organization should have. Then you can decide what direction to take. So it's not about diving in and going, we have to do something now in terms of like building some generative AI solutions or embedding AI into our organization, because really they're technologies to solve a problem. We first need to understand what the problem is, not just at a kind of grassroots level, but as a, is there an existential problem in our industry that we're going to be hit by if we don't do something? Right. That's an organization that needs to move quickly. An organization that's less impacted by that, fine, then do something a bit slower, or don't do anything at all, or use it as a co-pilot tool, but not as something that's embedded in the organization. Do you know what I mean? I think that helps shape your thinking about where you go and what you do. But you've got to answer that question. It's big enough to answer the question. It's like when the internet came out, you had to answer the question of what does this mean? And some organizations didn't do that. And there's lots of organizations that don't exist anymore because they didn't jump on that train quick enough. And this is that again.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, to paraphrase, if I may, yes, there potentially could be value by jumping in, but you also need to have some idea of where this aligns from an overall strategy perspective.
Yeah,
right? Don't just drive blind. Don't just go in for the sake of going, but have some understanding, maybe the bigger picture stuff. Where does this does it align to your strategy? Impact here to you and your industry and your company, and strategic alignment to it. So it's both. It's not just go now, and it's not just wait and figure it out. It's probably figure it out and go.
Yeah. Look, I always think that we the industry tries to kind of simplify this stuff down so much that it's binary, yes or no, do or don't. But it's really nuanced, and I don't think there's a black and white answer of yes or no in this. I think there's a very clear answer that it's worth taking some time to assess the impact now or in the future, and then make a call about what you do. That's just a really pragmatic, sensible way, I think, of dealing with innovation. Because you can bury your head in the sand and nothing will happen, or you can bury your head in the sand and be caught, in a year's time when, a new entrant comes into the market that has, AI-ified, is that a word? I just made that up. The whole industry, and if that happens, that's happened in industries where whole industries have been digitized. But actually, I'm going to contradict myself. So if you look at something like Airbnb, they changed the nature of staying away from home, and everyone thought that would be the end of hotels. But hotel businesses are booming, absolutely booming. It's now an and, it's not a instead of. Right. And so I think there's a real kind of like necessity to understand where this could go in your industry and what could happen, and then have a response. It's imperative.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You'd kind of hinted at this maybe in something you previously said from a Gen AI perspective, from the perspective of AI being operationalized via chatbots. Yeah. Are you seeing companies embrace that through the application side of the house and less on the data side of the house? Are you seeing companies saying, okay, hey, CTO, you are responsible for Gen AI because you are going to bake that into whatever. You're going to bake it into our customer-facing application. You're going to bake it into our CRM. You're going to bake it in somewhere. But this isn't a CTO thing. This is an app thing. Are you seeing that?
Well, if we look at what I think so, generative AI and particularly large language models, I think that's where we're talking, and I think that's more than chatbot, but large language models. They. You would be mad to build one of those. I know some organizations that have spent a hell of a lot of money now trying to build one, and
I quote you on that.
You'd be mad to build your own, right?
Yeah.
Do we agree with that?
Oh yeah. No, without a doubt. I mean, at the beginning of all of this, I used to hear people say, "Okay, I can't use my data to train an LLM."
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to. The first version of Bard had 7 billion parameters.
Yeah.
And it took 6,000 GPUs running for 12 weeks straight. So, not a lot of people have 6,000 GPUs just kicking around.
So the moat is too big and deep already for anyone to build it. So what does that mean? It's like really, some people have tried to build search engines, but really, it's hard to fend off the main players, right? It's the same here now. So if we essentially have the really good ones, and I'm not saying that there won't be any others, but it takes, as you deep pockets and a lot of time to be able to get good at this stuff. It's going to become table stakes. It's going to become something that everyone has access to, like you can just go search for something on Google or whatever you use. So if we're going to use OpenAI or one of the others, then that's the one we use. So that's not the competitive advantage. The tool, the technology is not the competitive advantage. Integrating it into what you do and how you work is the competitive advantage. And it's a technology, and it's all really where I think this sort of starts to go is it's about the experience, the process, the interaction that you have with it, and how you embed that into what you do. So if you're embedding LLMs into your, day-to-day workflow, that's something that might be embedded into your video conferencing, your emails, your calendar. That's all about integration. It's about technology. It's about customer experience and user experience. Those aren't the things that tend to sit with the chief data officer.
Right.
They might do, which is why I'm stopping short of saying it shouldn't be with them, but they tend not to be. They'd be with digital leaders, transformation leaders, technology leaders, architects, those sorts of people that know how to embed technology, but even experienced designers that know how to build kind of structures that people can interact with digitally. So I think it's a different paradigm. Where it comes back into CDO, though, is where's the differentiator? So the differentiator might be in the experience that you have with interacting with the large language model, or it might be in the data itself that you add to it. So data all of a sudden and packaged data sets all of a sudden, not even necessarily all of a sudden, because they probably should have been before, but all of a sudden become potentially a USP when worked alongside a off-the-shelf LLM. So I think there's a kind of, you get two halves. I think let's call it the traditional AI, so the non-generative AI, that certainly still probably does still sit with a good CDO and someone who's building artificial intelligence solutions inside an organization. Cool, that is right. That sits with whoever currently is the data leader. That's correct. But so I think it depends on your organization. But I think this is different. I think generative AI is different.
Yeah, totally agree. So, what I've been talking about for nearly about a year now is that for now, I think most companies will operationalize LLMs just as you described, right? There'll be co-pilots embedded in wherever, right? Maybe that's a custom co-pilot in something you build or your customer-facing application. Maybe it's an off-the-shelf co-pilot that is being used in one of the Microsoft products or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the difference there will be the data that you feed into the prompt, right? At the beginning of all of this, we were talking about complex prompt engineering, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, hold on. This seems like hand rolling code here. I'm not so sure we all need to be prompt engineers, and it turns out I don't think we do. But the latest version of GPT can take 300 pages of text in a prompt, right? You could put a lot of information in a vector database that could actually be consumed in a prompt to say, here is a known fact set. Here are all the interactions we've had with customer ABC over the last year. Now give me a summary about what I should do next with customer ABC, or what customer ABC might like to consume next as a product. You could be asking that of an LLM. The data that you're feeding into the prompt, if it's good quality, if it's accurate, if it's consistent, if it's trustworthy, you're going to get good responses back. If it's not, you're not. So it's the same paradigm we've always faced, I think.
Yeah, good quality data sets that are feeding applications and interactions that people have. Wow, that sounds quite dull, doesn't it? That's all we need to do here.
Well, but it's interesting though.
Yeah,
it's interesting though, because I'm still hearing people say, I can't use my data to train an LLM. And as much as I'm out there saying the P in GPT stands for pre-trained. You're not training an LLM. If you're using an open source LLM, you might be doing something called fine tuning it, which is basically a series of questions and answers that you could kind of fine tune the model to lean a certain way. Maybe lean towards a procurement use case or lean towards a customer service use case or something. But you're not training an LLM, to your point. I mean, that's a massive moat. And we're already seeing, a lot of commoditization there. Most of the vendors are just competing on speed and accuracy. Yeah. So I think there's learning to be had here for a lot of data leaders, and whether it's FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or whether it's just a plain old knowledge gap. I think that's a big part of becoming more ready.
Yeah,
shall we say? It's just learning about this stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and as always, It gets very complicated very quickly. We've just went into a bit of technical depth there, although not very far, and even that can be quite complicated for people that aren't familiar with it, right? And I think the important bit, again, just raising it back up to it, is an organization ready? It's knowing where to play with this stuff. Where should we play? And you can be purist and go, well, let's think about the business strategy and the problems we've got and work backwards and only think about problems that LLMs and generative AI can solve. But bit purist, and actually you might miss some opportunity, some innovation, because actually this is so different and there's so many new things that this generative AI thing can do that actually it also makes sense to think about in the other direction and meet in the middle, where new innovation and problem that we have can be solved in these new ways that we hadn't thought of. That's design thinking. That's business analysis. That's process engineering. That's understanding how does the business actually work. And these are all like powerful tools that businesses need to have in their minds and then actually do. And if data leaders can have those are that way inclined, if data leaders can think that way, I think they can have a really strong play in this space and take a real strong leadership in helping to change how an organization thinks about what it's able to do, and grab this opportunity, which I do think it's really big and really strong.
So be the chief digital officer, be the chief transformation officer all at once. Roll all those things all together. Be that unicorn.
Maybe. I think that's probably with those titles that makes it too big and a bit too toe tready on roles that possibly exist. But there's no. I don't think anymore, and maybe there never was. I don't think there's very neat squares or circles around roles. There's always this kind of like overlap, and I think the overlap's either really helpful if you're an organization that is able to collaborate very well, and the overlaps are a problem when you don't collaborate and you just fight with who's responsible and try and pull control from each other. But I know the principle of what you mean is you've got to think a bit digital, you've got to think a bit transformation, you've got to think innovation, you've got to think data, you've got to think commercial, you've got to think finance, or at least bring the people together that have that experience and take leadership in that respect.
You said design thinking. I was like, in my mind, I'm saying, yes, we need more of that. Because when I think design thinking, when I think, be innovative, take some risks, understand customers with, really, really deep levels of intimacy. What do they want? What do they not want? To me, that sounds like product, right? Like that to me, that sounds like an exceptional product leader. Doesn't mean that CDOs need to become product people and product people need to become CDOs per se. Maybe there could be opportunities there, but makes me start thinking about products.
Yep.
So what are you hearing in the space? What are you hearing out there related to data products? And does that align to the idea of design thinking? Do what most people are calling data products even really kind of align to that world, or is it something else?
I think that conceptually it's all quite similar. I mean, we've been talking to customers about sort of data products and data product management more specifically for a number of years, and getting there was almost like is almost like trying to create an organization that uses agile in its deepest form, the methodology agile, not being agile. So it's quite a transformational thing that needs to happen to become fully agile. In the same way, it's quite a transformational thing to become fully kind of product led with how you think about building solutions to solve problems. And I think when my example before about where we were talking about generative AI and if that's the tool that you bring in and now it's about embedding it, we need to think about it from a product perspective. Like what problem does that solve? What metrics can we use to test whether it's working? How do we keep improving it? Who's going to look after it? Who's going to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do? Who's going to make sure it's iterating and improving and we're doing new releases and new versions of it so that it's getting better and solving bigger problems than it did before? I think if we can package up solutions that we build with that mentality of product in the same way we think about physical products like a phone or an ironing board or a cup or whatever you buy, then we can think about AI solutions and actually even any data solution in the same way. It's got to solve a problem, and if we build around solving that problem, then we know that it's supposed to be doing something. It's got a means to an end, not just something that exists for the sake of existing.
What you just described, data product management.
Exactly.
Love it. Like,
Yeah.
love it. Applying product management as a discipline to data management. All those things you just said, like life cycle
Mm.
management, right? Understanding customer needs. What problem does this solve? What value does it bring? Maybe even quantifying that. So
Ooh, yeah, I like
I've
that.
been in a number of interesting dialogues on LinkedIn recently, related to data valuation. Where do you sit on
Mm.
this? Is the idea of valuing data, is this just a fool's errand? Is it like, the Sasquatch and the Yeti and the Loch Ness all locked, all as one, or is it something that you can actually do?
I think there's kind of two angles to that actually. One is the value that applying data to something has. So if I apply data to better understanding customers, then I can, target them more effectively or make more of the right products that they need. And that adds value. That makes them spend some more money. So there's an incremental gain by applying data to something that you can put a value on. And I think we should. And I don't think we should do much with data generally where we're not thinking about that kind of like upside, that impact. It might be cost saving if we're automating something. Of course, it might be reducing cost, but I think that for me is monetizing data. That is putting a value on the application of data rather than the data itself, but the application of data. And there's loads that organizations could do and to do with that, and definitely should. Then I think there's the value of the data itself, and for some companies, I don't think that is relevant. Actually, I think at some companies the application of data is what makes money or saves money. I think if you're in an industry where you are sitting on a pot of data that doesn't exist elsewhere and other people could get value from it, great. Let's put a value on it and let's try and sell it in the broadest sense. And that might not be actually charged for it. It might be about creating more sticky relationships with your suppliers so they renew their contract. So I think you can put a value on data if it's a unique data set. So just a list of customers that we have is not unique because customers shop in lots of places. So I don't think that's necessarily unique. But if you're in an industry where there's only two or three players and you've got 30, 40, 50% of the market share, that's a really interesting data set that people will be interested in. Or if you've added value to that data in some other ways by applying other things about customers, for example, like Facebook does, and turn that into an advertising engine. So I think you can monetize data by how it can be applied. You can monetize data by if it's unique. But I also think you can monetize data through, particularly as I talked about with generative AI, where adding data to a certain situation multiplies the effect. And I think that's where people should start looking at their own data, saying, how can we use this data to add value to a business challenge somewhere?
Yeah, the idea that you can't value data to me just doesn't pass the smell test, because we all know, like intuitive, we all know that if the data was better, the business processes would be smoother and we would make more money, right? Like that's just it's just intuitive. It's
Mm.
logical
Yeah.
to think that better data will optimize processes, which will yield business
Yeah.
results. We like to get kind of wrapped around the axle around thinking about like the intrinsic value of data. If a field of data is sitting, latent, in a database somewhere, just collecting digital dust, does it have intrinsic value? That's where I think we as data people love to fall down rabbit holes and
I
and
agree.
to start talking about generally accepted accounting principles and those types of things. But to me, data has to have value and it has to be able to drive value, because if it doesn't, I think I'd have a hard time justifying my job.
Yeah. As I say, but I think you're right. Maybe it's a splitting hair or nuance point here, but it's about the application, the use of
Yeah.
the data, or the assurance that it's good. So, particularly in the data management field of data, which is obviously one strand, poor data management causes problems somewhere. Processes break, or customer interactions fall over, caused by data problems. So fixing that doesn't mean that data has value per se, but it does mean that resolving a problem stops you from losing money, or stops you from having brand reputation damage, or stops you from some risk that you have. So I think the application or the misapplication of data is what has value. And then for some companies, packaging up data into little sets that you can do something with then also has some additional value.
I'm attracted to the idea of kind of running a data function as if it were a P&L. Like
Hmm.
not charging for everything, right? Not putting a price tag on everything per se, but running the organization as if you were making. I mean, you'd made reference before about like products. Maybe you were making an ironing board. If you had to make a good iron, if you were making them, you had to make them good. You'd have to meet a customer need. You'd have to do it in a way that was cost effective and cost efficient. So I kind of conceptually like the idea of running a data function that way, even if your CFO doesn't think the data has any value. What do you think when you hear that?
I think most organizations don't have the operating model that supports actually running in that way, as in physically having a team that has a P&L in that way. And often, it's the phrase wooden dollars, often because it's internal movement of money. It's not really no one's really paying or losing money in that respect. But yeah, of course, there's costs. But so conceptually, though, there are costs associated with running any function, even if it's just one person. And in large organizations, the data teams can be hundreds, of course, if not more. And there are and those costs have to go somewhere. They have to deliver some value, because otherwise, what's the point of having those costs? And some people are better at having rigor around that. And the cost, if that cost produces results, it's making something. It's either washing its own face, it's getting enough back that covers the cost, or it's making more. So yeah, in that respect, that is profit and loss. That is making money or not making money. And I think a good data function with a strong commercially minded data leader who wants to have a long, fruitful career will be thinking about both the sides of that equation, the value that it can deliver and the cost. And I think you have to, I personally think as a CDO, you have to earn the right to spend the company's money in some way. You have to earn the right to get investment to do more things. And sometimes you can get lucky and someone can go, yeah, I get it, a leap of faith, here's some cash to go and do something. But that does run out. So I think the mentality of P&L, the mentality of let's spend some money to make some money, let's spend some more money once we've made some money, which is how you run a business. You can only spend it if you've got it, and you either get it by borrowing it, getting investment, or making money and reinvesting. I love that concept, and it's not. And I think mentality wise, that's something all data leaders should be thinking about, and it's certainly what we try and instill in customers.
Yeah, I think it is really about a mentality at the end of the day, right? It's about that P&L mentality, right? It's about driving value and thinking, hey, my job entirely depends on this.
Yeah.
And in my experience in having worked with hundreds of CDOs, largely through my time at Gartner, I could kind of sense the mentality, right? And you've used the word commercially minded, right? You could use a phrase to say kind of P&L centric. You could say maybe business centric. But that mindset that's associated with that type of leader versus the leader that sees himself more as a cost center and as a pure cost center, as more of just an operating function. I could remember kind of palpable differences between those two mindsets. And I think it's interesting, because if I were to paraphrase everything you've been saying for the last 40 minutes or so, what I'm hearing you say over and over and over again in different forms is get closer to the business. Right? I'm hearing you say, get closer to the business, understand the business, understand the cost drivers, understand business processes. How does AI get operationalized? What does your operating model look like to best drive outcomes for the business?
Yeah.
Which is often I hear the exact opposite, believe it or not. I hear what you're saying is kind of shift right. Right. And what I hear often is more of a shift left, like get closer to the data, get closer to the business applications, get closer to the source. And I don't think it's an either or, but if I had to pick, I know which one I'd be leaning towards.
I suppose, again, there's how does that physically manifest itself? I think either of those. You do need to do both. I think even if you're a support function to other parts of the organization, which I think is sort of more the shifting towards data, then you're raising up a level, and the organization needs to understand the return and cost associated with doing data. But yeah, I kind of feel that a chief data officer that doesn't care about, and I don't think I've seen any that doesn't care about upside and value, but there's certainly some that act and behave in ways that don't lean them closer towards delivering value. But it does come back. It does come back to the sort of operating model of how an organization sees data. And this isn't just down to the CDO. Frankly, this isn't just about the CDO going, I'm either a cost center or I'm a profit center, or I sit near a data or I sit near commercial. This is about a conscious choice by an organization about how best to set up and how best to get value, and how do we work and collaborate as an organization to ensure that we're solving for the right things. But I do think there's an obligation on the CDO to help the company that they work for to get to that sort of mind space. Because we got to think about it in that way.
What you're describing is a change agent, right? What you're describing is somebody who can lead an organization through change, whether that's changing a mindset, whether it's changing a process or an operating model.
Yeah,
that's another kind of recurring thing that I think I'm hearing here, which is digitally transforming. Okay, that sounds great, but really what we're talking about is building a change-resistant organization. Really what we're talking about with becoming AI ready is building a change-resistant organization. And to summarize everything I've been hearing you say, that really seems to be job number one. Now, how you do that?
Yeah,
we didn't book a second hour.
No,
I mean, but how you actually do that? Whether you'd mentioned the adoption of agile methodologies. We talked earlier about experimentation and trying and learning by doing. I think there's a lot of interesting conversations we could have about how. But maybe that's a great last question to ask here as we wind down our time. I'm your customer, and I've engaged you. Okay, I need to do some of these things. I need to become more change resistant. What are the one or two or three things that you would counsel your customers to focus on to do that?
Yeah, I would. So there's a few. So I would.
And I understand to answer this in 3 or 4 minutes is probably this is a little unfair of me to, but still give it a whirl.
I think it's a good question. I think there's a few things. So there's start small and iterate. So you don't need to go all the way and solve all the problems straight away. We need to find something to start with and test, learn, prove value, establish the right agenda, and then iterate from there. So start small and iterate. I would laser focus on business problems, business outcomes that the organization needs to solve. I wouldn't start with trying to sort out data. I think through the problem that you're trying to solve, we get to what data we need to fix and clean and put in the right place in order to solve that problem. And I would focus on collaboration and communication. So very high communication, very high collaboration across the organization. I think the combination of those things builds you credibility, it builds trust. It gets you known. It gets your awareness up about where the problems are in the business, and it focuses you not just on strategy and long term, but also execution and solving problems today.
Brilliant. That's a great way to end the conversation. If you are interested in hearing more, please check out Jason. Your LinkedIn. You're prolific on LinkedIn. Your company, Synergir.com, correct?
That's right. Yep.
All right. Please check them out. Jason, thank you so much for carving an hour out of your busy Monday to chat with us. I really appreciate it.
I've loved it. Thank you. And appreciate you having me on the show. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, to all of our listeners, thank you. Please consider subscribing to the podcast if you haven't already. I really, really appreciate your engagement. We are building an active community here through CDO Matters, whether that is engagement with me on LinkedIn, or whether that's engagement through our podcasts or through our blogs or through our live events the third Friday of every month. If you've got questions about data, if you need to build a data strategy, if you're struggling with getting a governance program off the ground, come check us out. We're sharing insights all day, every day through multiple channels. My goal here is to help extend the tenures of CDOs and everybody that wants to be a CDO. Thank you for checking us out. We'll see you on another episode of CDO Matters sometimes very soon. Thanks all. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks.